So I particularly want to salute GAIA Africa for this initiative. I commend you on your auspicious timing on the back of the production of yet another female prime minister in Britain. And it is not a complete side issue because, of course, Britain is central to the story of Nigeria, as will appear from my presentation. Now, I would like to open my substantive comments by sharing with you a short email that I received from a young man just a week before you contacted me to deliver this presentation. This is what he said. Good evening, sir. I thoroughly enjoyed reading your book, A Fatherless People, and have since tuned into your channels to hear your insight on subjects regarding what is now known as Nigeria. What can a Yoruba man born in the United Kingdom do to change things? Maybe change is too narcissistic. Maybe influence is the correct term. Now, it was just ironic that it was only a few days after that I got contact from yourselves to speak on this issue of the lessons from that book, A Fatherless People. There are 4 principal lessons. I'll add a 5th later, but there are 4 primary ones. And this is what I'm going to share with you. Let me list them first. So if you wish to make notes as you go along, you can. The first lesson is that there is nothing wrong with us as a people. The problem is Nigeria, not Nigerians. The second lesson is that Nigeria was not a mistake. It is working precisely in accordance with the design for Nigeria. The third lesson is that all is not as it appears on the surface, both characters and events. If you're really going to understand Nigeria, you've got to be prepared to look beneath the surface. The 4th principal lesson from A Fatherless People is a joyous one, is a happy one. All those ones may be depressing. But the happy news is that it can be fixed. It can be fixed because we now understand the problem. So let me go back to my first point. There is nothing wrong with us as a people. You know, it was always tempting and easy to default to the narrative. There's something wrong with us. How many times if we're honest with ourselves, we've either said it or we've heard it said about ourselves. There must be something wrong with us. That can be the only explanation for why things are the way they are. But of course, when our people come out of the Nigeria construct and they operate in another environment, you see them all breaking records and rising to the top. So an intelligent person then has to say, why? What is the reason for that? What is the real explanation for what's going on? Because if the problem is the people, then you're stuck. You can't change them. We are who we are and what we are. But if the problem is the structure, if the problem is Nigeria, then it's fixable. And my argument is that the problem is Nigeria, not Nigerians. And our challenge is to save Nigerians and all their potential from Nigeria, that structure. I underline this point by reminding us that every country on this planet, on God's earth, has its mix of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if you find that in any particular country, those who are at the top, the real influencers who are setting the pace, are the good and not the bad and the ugly. And whereas in another country, our country, those who are setting the pace of things, setting the standards and the precedents, are the bad and the ugly, then it's not, the problem is not that they are good, bad, and ugly people there. The problem is the structure that is allowing a certain kind of people to emerge on the great stage and shutting out the others. So look at the British parliamentary or prime ministerial contest. All manner of candidates were popping up, each with potential. None of those candidates would you have to hold your nose and say, well, this is the least worst of the bunch. They're looking for the best of the bunch. And that is because of the structure. So let me break it down. Why do I say it is the structure? What are the elements in the structure that make Nigeria work the way it does? The first and most important point is this. Nigeria is an amalgam of 371 ethnic groups, each with their own language, their own heroes and history, their own territorial area, their own heroes, and often their own faith. You will not find the equivalents anywhere on this planet. 371 ethnic groups that were formerly self-standing before we were thrown into political union. Second key point, with that 371 amalgam, we were then foisted with a constitutional arrangement, an electoral system that said one man, one vote, regardless of educational level, regardless of income level, and without regard to their ability to sustain themselves. Now, in principle, that's wonderful. Universal suffrage, one man, one vote. But when you consider that Britain, our reference points, the architects of the Nigeria construct that started us off with one man, one vote, Britain itself took 600 years to move from the point where the first person had a vote, i.e. away from the rule of kings, to the point of one man, one vote. 600 years. The empire had been built. The world had been conquered by the time they got to one man, one vote in 1929. Now, in principle, it shouldn't be a problem. That's where we all want to get to. But here's an important detail. This is not what they did in East Africa. Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe, in all of those territories where there were white settlers whose investments would be exposed to the standard of governance, you had to have a minimum property qualification, a minimum educational qualification, and a minimum level of income. Because they know and they knew that that sophisticated electoral model that ideal of one man, one vote is only appropriate in an environment where there are low levels of poverty, low levels of illiteracy, because otherwise your permanent majority will be those who, for no fault of their own, are below the subsistence level. Their votes will always be vulnerable to capture by the money bags. So that's a second fundamental structural problem that Nigeria has. Let me move to the second learning point. It's an important one. Nigeria was not a mistake. It is working precisely as it was designed. Now, one of the former colonial administrators wrote a letter saying it was a grave mistake. They shouldn't have amalgamated so many different nations, and it would have been better to create smaller groups. But it was not a mistake, it was by design. You see, when you go home after this discussion, if you look at the map of West Africa, you will see that Nigeria truly is a giant. It is, because it towers above the neighboring countries either side. If you look at the map, you see Ivory Coast on a level, you see Ghana at a level, Togo, you see Benin Republic. You then see Nigeria go up, across, and then down again. And then you see Cameroon at the same level as the others that I mentioned first. Call it the penthouse. That strip at the top, which, as it happens now, these are largely the Sharia states in Nigeria. Now, why is it that Nigeria has that extra rooftop? I shall explain to you, because it was part of the design. You see, under the terms that were agreed at the Berlin Conference for the carve-up of Africa between the European colonial powers, that penthouse, the Sharia strip, should properly have gone to France and been part of Niger, French Niger. How did it come to form part of Nigeria? It was effectively at gunpoint. It was the British and the French haggling over the territorial space, the French trying to apply the principles that were agreed in Berlin. And the British made it clear to them that they were ready to go to war over this particular strip. They needed it. The war was avoided by a compromise that was struck between them. There was a land swap, a territorial exchange. Britain agreed to release its territorial claims in faraway Madagascar in return for being allowed to have that strip, the penthouse. This was sealed in a deal on the 13th of June, 1898, a treaty between the French and the British. Now, what was in that strip? Diamonds, gold, oil? None of the above, as we all know. It was simply the need to have that instrument of conflict embedded in what would otherwise have been, and up to then was, a wholly Christian territory. This was born of experience from India, where the Hindus of against the Muslims. It was always also born of their own experience in Ireland, of conflicts in the island of Ireland between Protestants and Catholics. It was born of their own experience, even in Britain itself, which was once Catholic and now became Protestants. The second major detail that explains that this was not a mistake but by design was in relation to what was southern Nigeria, because there were two Nigerias, separately administered, separate countries with border patrols between the two countries, northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria. Then the decision was made to amalgamate these in 1914, supposedly to make one Nigeria. But what then happened? You wind forward to April Fool's Day, 1939. That was the day on which Governor Bernard Bourdillon decided to create in southern Nigeria, eastern region and western region. For what purpose? Nobody asked for it in the south. There was no conflict between east and west. But again, it was part of the design plan to create two halves to play against the one whole in the north. So even though northern Nigeria was territorially greater than southern Nigeria by a huge scale, the area that was partitioned supposedly for administrative convenience was southern Nigeria. And this was the genesis of the East-West rivalry, and specifically the Igbo-Yoruba tension, crisis, which we even see playing out in the current election. Every electoral season, the April Fool's joke is played again and again and again. I've recently started naming those who play that particular game members of the 1939 Fools Club, because that's exactly what is going on. So there you have the roots of the crisis between North and South, the 1898 swap for Madagascar, and you've also got the roots of the East-West rivalry in the South, and between the Igbos and the Yoruba in particular, in the April Fool's ploy of 1939. Let me move forward to the third point, third principal lesson, which is that all is not as it appears on the surface when you're looking at the Nigeria story. If you look at how the duck swims, you'll be deceived as to what is going on, because you're only looking at the surface level. Underneath the waters, you'll see the legs working frantically. That is actually the reality of the Nigeria story. So whether you look at independence, for example, we are granted independence. Well, independence is not something that's granted. Independence is something that is won. It is seized, it is taken. You free yourself. When it is granted to you, it is granted to you on terms. The date on which you become independent was fixed in London. The Act of Parliament by which independence was granted was, of course, deliberated in Westminster and discussed and debated, not in Nigeria, but in Westminster. The decision as to who would run the government after the British exit, or theoretical exit, was made in London. And that decision had been made before any so-called independence elections. Balewa had been anointed prime minister in 1957, way before any independence elections at the end of 1959. So the incumbency was there. And then just to make sure, we now know from the book that the independence elections were effectively rigged to ensure that outcome. And another interesting detail is that the person who was to run our army, very vital institution, of course, if you claim to be independent, because you're only as independent as your ability to secure your independence. The head of the army was a Briton up until 1964. So we were nominally independent in 1960, but our army was still headed by a Briton in 1964. The same applies to events like Biafra, that big issue, Biafra. One of the key points that comes through in the book is the significance of dates, because the dates give you a clue as to what's going on. I first noted in the course of the research that a particular date kept popping up. That date of the month was 29th. Such that I noted that the first round of pogroms against the Igbos was 29th of May, 1966. The second round was 29th of July, 1966. And the third round was 29th of September, 1966. Now, being an averagely intelligent person, as soon as I saw that, I said, well, this is strange. What's going on here? What is the significance of this 29th? And applying our investigative skills, we finally got to the bottom of the riddle. The 29th of May, 1453, was the date on which the forces of Islam, the Ottomans, conquered what was then the capital of the Christian Roman Empire, which had been moved from Rome to Constantinople, which since that day of conquest, 29th of May, 1453, we now know as Istanbul. So it became clear that the 29th of May in particular, and the 29th in general, was a very significant date in our calendar. And that became clear the more you now looked. Once you're equipped with that knowledge and you start reviewing Nigeria's history, and at the beginning of the book, there's a chronology, and you start seeing the 29th popping up. So for example, the state of emergency that was declared in the Western region in 1962 was 29th of May, 1962. And curiously, and very curiously, Biafra was declared at 2 a.m. on the 29th of May. Following the close of the 29th of May, Biafra was declared. And I was, as a researcher and an averagely intelligent person, I say to myself, who were you declaring it to at 2 a.m. in the morning? If you're going to declare independence, it's not at that time of morning that you'd be making a declaration. The greater significance was that 29th date. One of the other very important aspects of this lesson is the importance of, when you're looking at Nigerian events, being careful to understand the role of local agents in the game being played by the external principles. Because it's very easy to say, well, it's Nigerians doing it, so we are to blame. But an agent's action belongs on the same side as the balance of the balance sheet as his or her principle. So let me give you a classic illustration that comes from the book. according to the story of the Biafra War, Ojukwu left the country before the end of the war, just before the surrender. On the face of it, it looks like an act of a principle. He's the leader of the Biafran war efforts. But what the book explains is that Harold Wilson had already told Gowon that it would be a good thing to allow him to slip through your fingers once victory is assured. And lo and behold, that's precisely what then happened. So these are the kind of things that one has to look out for, and which come through in the book as you go through it. I then move to the fourth point. The problem can be fixed. It can be fixed because it is now understood. You can't solve a problem. Cast your mind back to your school days, maths problems in particular. Until you get your brain around it, how it sits together, how it's configured, the component parts, you'll be floundering right, left, and center. That is what we have been doing because we have not understood the configuration of the problem. We thought we did, but we didn't, because all the lessons that come through the book were absent and missing. So now that we do have an understanding, and we do have those infrared goggles that can see in the dark and see what's really going on, what is the solution? The solution is something that my group, Fatherland Group, has been pushing. The Fatherland Group, it actually flows from the book, Fatherless. You can see the correlation between the name of the group and the title of the book, because it's made up of those who have read the book or who are in the process of reading it. And the solution that we've proposed is not nuclear. It is actually very simple and straightforward. It is what we call the union of the orange, because we came to realize that the form of union that they've been pushing to us, yes, Nigerians want to be together, but what kind of unity, what kind of union do we want? We've never been asked that question for an opportunity to answer it. If you compare the apple and the orange, both in their roundness represents togetherness and unity. Peel the skin of the apple, you see an indistinguishable mass underneath. That is suitable for homogeneous communities. Where you have the level of diversity that we have, it is the orange union that can accommodate that diversity. So when you peel the skin of the orange, you see each segment of the orange in its own space, complete and whole, but then together foaming that orange, and the skin represents the union. Call it Nigeria if you wish. So yes, better together, but it needs to be the right way, because otherwise it's the politics of domination. Winner takes all. That is what the Apple Union represents. And the interesting thing is that when you look around the world and you look at what kind of union do they have, look at Switzerland. It's the Orange Union. Look at the European Union. It is the Orange Union. Look at Britain itself. Liz Truss is Britain. You know it's the Orange Union. They have their Scottish Parliament for the Scots, the Irish Northern Ireland Assembly for the Northern Irish, the Irish Parliament for the Irish proper, and they have the Scottish Parliament for the Scots. And rest assured, Westminster is England's Parliament. So it is not, we're not doing anything new, but we are now shaping our union to serve us, rather than for us to be sacrificed, as we have been doing. If you think how many lives have been lost in the quest for unity in Nigeria. The last point, before I now take questions, is that the lessons from the book. Nigerians do read. Africans do read. There was this myth that's been pushed that if you want to hide a secret, put it in a book. Yeah. Black man, the African, would never read it. It's untrue. Because when a book speaks to our experience and gives us what we really want to know, we read it with passion. We read it with enthusiasm. Thank you very much once again for this opportunity. Now I will hand over to my interrogators. I know there are many out there, and looking forward to the discussion.
Join the change. From one Nigeria, the unity of the apple, to true federalism in the union of the orange.